There were no Chandlers. Chandler was a working man's name, I learned from a reference book, a maker of candles, a city trade. Any and all Chandlers in the genealogies were a long way from the castle, even if, as Mom had a habit of pointing out whenever the occasion arose, we owned the house we lived in free and clear, her pride in the matter so evident whenever it came up that it made imagining kings further back in the bracket a little harder still. I wondered, but I didn't want to press her on the question. At some point, we'd stopped being royal, I guessed. It can happen to the best of families. But the story traveled with me as I grew up, learning along the way to let my mind wander to tales of kings and princes wrongly deposed, sent from the great countryside to London, where they learned to live by the work of their hands, pouring wax into iron molds they'd spirited out of the castle's workshops as the barbarians sacked the great hall, carrying their meager but vital plunder in packs on backs by night to the outskirts of the city, learning their way. The Chandlers, great lights made small. I was good at telling stories when I was a kid. It became a habit. I wrote my first book while finishing my undergraduate degree in journalism at Cal Poly. It didn't hit the bestseller list, but in paperback it found its range. The White Witch of Morro Bay is the kind of true crime book around which small cults form. I knew about the White Witch from childhood. Her reign was my time, broadly speaking. I was 3 when she went to trial. From playground to playground, and in every after-school haunt, her myth was still intoned with reverence and fear. She'd been a teacher at the high school. Her legend told of how for years she lured young men to her many-windowed house overlooking the bay. There, having plied them with drink and sapped them of their strength, she would drain their blood while they slept. She rendered their bodies with flensing tools and then fed them, piece by piece, to the fish. It was this detail, the fable ran, that attracted enough attention from the authorities to force her into hiding, from which she'd never emerged. The tide turned red one morning, while summer vacationers bathed in the surf. The real-life White Witch, Diana Crane, had actually only killed 2 people, both students, high school seniors who, having arrived at her apartment unannounced, caught her in a headlock before attempting to drag her to the bedroom. She was shucking oysters when they showed up. In the struggle, she got her knife into the first boy's eye, and then, looking up to find the co-conspirator immobilized by the sight of his friend's blood spraying out in jets, launched herself toward him and stabbed him in the neck 3 times. She continued stabbing until she felt sure that the present threat to her safety had been contained, which is to say, until both boys were dead. Later, she dragged the bodies, in pieces, to the shore. It was an ugly scene, and the jury sent her to the gas chamber. The prosecutors convinced them her tale of self-defense was a fabrication, something she'd made up to conceal her true nature, a crone in training who lived by herself in a seaside den, a place whose shelves and countertops boasted all manner of obscure arcana whose deeper meaning, they said, indicated that the downfall of young men had always been her goal. Diana Crane's story was that of a blameless schoolteacher who paid a terrible price for defending herself. Nobody involved in her prosecution, conviction, and execution had anything to be proud about. I still get mad thinking about it. One of the boys she'd killed had a track record with women. Old classmates, now nearing retirement, told me stories as I sat listening in vinyl-upholstered recliners under fluorescent lights. They'd carried these burdens with them almost their whole lives. Diana Crane had done a service to society by ridding it of Jesse Jenkins and Jean Cupp. For her trouble, she'd been strapped to a chair and made to breathe poison until she died. But the popular account omitted everything prior to the oyster knife, and from the resultant open question of what happened next, school children and bored night shift workers crafted the White Witch, the one all school children knew and feared. A Bluebeard in reverse, her crime hidden by apartment walls and the moon above the bay. In the legend, she'd never even been arrested. Diana Crane fled the scene by night, carnage in her wake, and, for all anyone knew, was still living somewhere by the bay, lying in wait. The movie they made out of my book later didn't set any box office records, but I got paid up front. I've been writing about crimes ever since. The crimes people tell stories about, and the secret ones our stories seek to conceal. I was 37 when I came down to Milpitas. I had 5 books out under my own name, and, under a pen name that I still keep secret,